this because there was a spiritual force that united and empowered them. They came from different parts of Africa. They had been kidnapped, usually by other Africans, and sold to the whites. And so when they were brought to the Caribbean, to the islands, they were separated. The idea was that people from the same village should not be together, because as soon as they are together, it's easier for them to revolt. That empowers them. So they would separate people. Often you would find yourself working in a plantation where there were no people from your own village, not from your own race or religion or language. So there was a blend of words, African words, and French language that created the Creole that is spoken in Haiti today. But also the same thing happened with religion. People came with different beliefs, including many Muslims that came. And as soon as they landed, they were baptized. And that was it. That was the extent of the spiritual Christian faith that they would get. And then they were sold. And so some of them who remained in the cities probably got more of the Catholicism. But those who went to the plantations got nothing. And there, the blending of all these beliefs gave birth to voodoo, which is an extraordinary religion. It has one God only, Papa Bon Dieu, and then it has the Loas, who are like the saints in the Catholic Church, or the Orishas in Candomblé. And it's the intermediary divinities. But what is, in my opinion, most extraordinary is that in the ceremonies, with the drumming that went for hours and hours, people would fall in a trance. And in a trance, they would be mounted by the Loa. These people had nothing. Their life expectancy was 4 to 6 years in the cane fields. Now, can you imagine that for a few minutes or maybe hours, you are possessed by the divinity? You are the divinity. This feeling of empowerment gave them such strength that they were able to confront the cannons of Napoleon with machetes. So I think that is really important in the culture, in the revolution, in Haiti today. I'm very respectful of that. Personally, I'm not a religious person, but when I see what people are able to do when they have faith, it's really impressive.
All right, I'd like to change the questioning for a moment or two. We've covered this before. Once upon a time in the White House was a president by the name of Richard Nixon, with his German foreign minister, as I refer to Herr Kissinger. And there had been in Chile an election, freely held, Chile being one of the great democracies of South America, a long history of democracy. And the individual who was elected was named Allende. And for reasons apparently of politics, not trusting the leftward aspects of Allende, a green light was flashed from the White House that said to the Chilean military, we would not be unhappy if there was a coup. And there was a coup, and in the coup, President-elect Allende was murdered. He was dead at the end of the... He was a member of your extended family. Do you have any sense as why American leaders so distrust the left in South America?
It was a time of the Cold War when the planet was divided between the area that was controlled by the Soviet Union and the area that was controlled by the Americans. And already the Cuban Revolution had succeeded, and it had turned leftist, and because it wasn't so leftist at the beginning. And at the beginning it had the support of the United States, and then it didn't, because it turned left, socialist. And the United States was paranoid about socialism. And the idea that socialism could spread in Latin America was terrifying to Americans. So they fought savagely against all the guerrilla movements, all the socialist and leftist movements in Latin America, and promoted military coups and dictatorships that for a decade and a half devastated Latin America. And there were masses of refugees running away from one country to another for safety, people who disappeared, who were tortured and murdered, not only in Chile, also in Uruguay, in Argentina, in Central America, in Brazil, everywhere. And the United States was behind all this because of this paranoia of the Cold War. And just as the Soviet Union was eliminating any opposition in their area. So that explains what happened. Now, what is interesting is that if a socialist government is elected today, nothing happens because the Cold War is over. And in Chile, we have had now, after the dictatorship, 20 years of center-left governments. The last government before now was Michelle Bachelet, who was a socialist. And she had been a victim of the military during the dictatorship. Her father was assassinated. He died in tortured by his peers. He was a general. She was 15. She and her mother were arrested by men that she called uncles, because in Chile you call uncle to the friends of the family who are the generation of your parents, uncles and aunts. And she was tortured, and her mother. Eventually, they were let go and they went into exile. She became a doctor in Germany. She returned to Chile, and she became involved in politics, became Minister of Health because she's a doctor, and then Minister of Defense. And her job was to deal with the military, the same people who had killed her father. So, and she did a wonderful job. Michelle Bachelet ended her term in March of this year with 86% approval in the polls. This is unheard of in Chile, where nobody is never satisfied with anything. If you have 2 Chileans in a room, you have 3 political parties. So she is a hero. However, the opposition won the election. And now we have a conservative president who came in with a new team of 40-year-old kids. And it's a very different government.
Nevertheless, Allende was dead, and General Pinochet became the head of the government, and generals appeared in Buenos Aires and in Brazil, and suddenly across the landscape was basically the military in office. And they lasted a long time. It wasn't a day, a week, or a year. It was over.
In Chile, it was almost 17 years. And so the country changed dramatically.
So I remind you of a conversation we had in which I was in a Broadway theater and I saw a play, a 3-person play, taken from a piece of music by Franz Schubert, Death and the Maiden.
By Ariel Dorfman.
Dorfman's great play. And for you who didn't see it or see the film, the argument is that you're at a concert like Davies Symphony Hall. You're hearing magnificent Schubert. At intermission, you accidentally hear the voice of the man sitting in the box to your right. And you recognize immediately, even though you were blindfolded, that it's the man who tortured you. So Dorfman has the woman who recognizes it cleverly invite him back to their apartment, where she then ties him up and wants to return the favor of torture. And then there's a discussion of that feature, and to a brilliant series of talks between husband and wife, the decision is not to do that, but to release him. And in the last scene in the play, they're back again in the theater listening to music. she, the woman who was tortured, has learned somehow to live the rest of her life with a large number of people who she hates. I've often thought what I would have done if someone had killed or tortured members of my family.
Probably you would have not tortured because you are a better person. And I think I've thought about this many times because there was a time when I was so enraged. I carried with me so much hatred that I thought that I could do anything, the same things that they were doing. But eventually I realized that I would never do it, even if I had the power. And I had to get over the hatred because it was a terrible burden that was pulling me down. And I feel very free now that I don't carry that with me. Maybe everybody has the possibility of becoming the torturer, but it takes training. It really does. There was a wonderful documentary many, many years ago, in the 70s, I think it was, in times of the colonels in Greece. And the documentary was done by a Danish team, and it was called Thy Neighbor's Son, or something like that. And it was the idea that they pick up 12 young men, 18 years old, that have been drafted in the military. And they pick them up without choosing them. And they train them to become torturers. And there's only one of them that is untrainable. And the one that is untrainable is because he doesn't fit in the group. He doesn't blend in. He's a homosexual. And if you blend in and you have enough peer pressure and you reason that if you don't do it, it will be done to you, that you are doing it for a higher cause, your country, your religion, God, or whatever, you can do it. And if you have blood in your hands and everybody else has, somehow you're not responsible. Somebody else is responsible. You're not accountable. So power with impunity is very, very tricky, because we don't know what we can do if we have impunity and we have total power over another person. And this happens. Why is domestic violence so extended in the world? Because the people inside the house who commit domestic violence are not accountable. Nobody's asking questions, and it's always against the weakest in the family. The same in the society.
Costa Grievous made a great film about the Greek period in which the generals took over. It's called Z. Also, he did a film about the Argentine situation, State of Siege. And then even Hollywood finally woke up and did a film called Missing with Jack Lemmon, which tried to show the aspect of how these many people disappeared.
Yeah, Missing is based on a real case that happened in Chile. That a couple of young Americans that were living in Chile were arrested almost by mistake, and the American embassy did not protect them, on the contrary, and they were tortured and killed. And then the father of the boy went to Chile looking for his son. And when he found out that he had been killed, he tries to make the embassy accountable, somebody accountable, and nobody was. Jack Lemmon did a wonderful job in that movie. If you haven't seen it, you should. It's really an excellent movie.
Talking about movies, I always wondered what you thought of Hollywood's version of House of the Spirits.
I like the idea of having my books made into movies because many people watch the movie and they never read. So I get at least the story across to people who will not read it. Of course, you can't expect the movie to be like the book. It's a different experience altogether. I would have preferred to have at least a few Latinos in the movie. I had only one, Antonio Banderas, who is worth several, if you think about it. But it had a very European look, the movie. I thought it was a very good movie, but it was German money, filmed in Portugal and in Denmark by a Danish director with American actors and spoken in English. It wasn't very Latino, really. And nobody asked me either. So there were some mistakes that maybe could have been avoided. Like, for example, there's a Christmas, and everybody's wearing coats and it's snowing. Christmas is summer in Chile. We're the southern hemisphere.
Obviously, Hollywood needed you. I felt the same way. I was looking for Javier Bardem, and not
He didn't exist then.
well, not as a star.
Not as a star.
So they
But
found,
Antonio Banderas, who was beginning to be a star,
and he was good.
recruited. Huh?
He was good.
He's always good.
Yeah.
Right. He's really good. You know,
But
the older he gets, the better he gets. It's like wine.
but they could have found somebody other than Jeremy Irons, perhaps.
I don't know. I think that the movie was not bad. It was a good movie. But because it didn't have any Latin flavor, before the movie was released, the Latino actors in Los Angeles complained. And so it was all over the press. And that was very bad advertising for the movie. It has done very well on TV. They show it all the time on TV now. But it didn't do well because of that.
So I'm going to ask you a very personal question. You had a daughter, Paula, and she died. How did you handle that? You wrote about it in a book.
You don't handle that. You sort of survive. My daughter had a rare condition that should not be fatal, and called porphyria. She went with a cold to a hospital in Madrid where she was living. They gave her the wrong medication. She fell in a coma. They didn't handle the coma properly. There was neglect. And when they gave Paula back to me, she was in a vegetative state. And I was able to bring her all the way from Madrid in a commercial flight, United flight. I don't know how we did that. And she spent the last few months of her life in our house and died with her family in my arms. I think writing the book helped me organize in my mind and in my heart the pain that had invaded everything in my life. At that time, my grandchildren were being born, 3 lovely babies. I was recently married with Willie. We were beginning to create something together. It was a time of writing, a time of many things, many good things that were happening. But everything disappeared in my life. The only thing that really mattered was Paula and Paula's illness and Paula's death. Writing the book helped me to contain it. And I think that is the wonder of writing, the wonder of literature, that it can contain a thought, a feeling, a moment, and preserve it intact and whole. I realized that I had suffered something that millions of women suffer in the world, in the history of the world. I was in no way unique. That my pain was the same pain that other people have felt. And that this event in my life had a name. It was Paula's death, but there were other things in life. And the rest I had to look at, and I had to live for that too. So I think that I'm not a sad person. I carry a certain sadness inside, which is, I don't want to get rid of it. I remember that I went to therapy for a while, and the therapy. Well, first of all, they gave me Prozac, and my mother said, "What? A pill to get over your daughter's death? Are you crazy? You have to go through the pain. There's nothing that will take it away. Of course, not a pill." And then in therapy, I also went into that horrible place of that tunnel that mourning is. And I emerged on the other side with a feeling that this sadness that I have is a very fertile soil in the bottom of my heart where very good things can grow. I don't want to get rid of it. I think that it is in that pain that we can plant the best plants, the best seeds.
Thank you. There's a story that on the publication date of House of the Spirits, you leave your house in Sausalito and you go to another house nearby, and you go in and close